Yes, I do have my next 5K coming up on the 14th of March, and that's actually going to raise money for one of the charities here in Atlanta. So, and that one is the Bad Prom Run. So I will be in a prom dress running.
Oh, Lord.
I know.
Tell me that, girl.
Yeah, we're going to need Jesus to take the wheel on that one. But anyway, guys, phenomenal show tonight. So I'm going to let you all get back now that we paid our bills and thanked our sponsors. And, Jaan, thank you again so much for coming on tonight and just for sharing your words of wisdom. All right.
Thank you, Anise. So, Jaan, you and I, we talked about a couple different, how passing can kind of affect different folks. And we talked about the privilege of kind of being read as who we feel we are on the inside, and how the world sees us, and how maybe that's affected by your socioeconomic status. And I want to shift a little bit and kind of discuss, something that's kind of intertwined is one of the things that I feel like is unfortunate occasionally about the concept of passing is that because so many people put such an emphasis on passing in the trans community, it can do kind of two things. One of the things that it can do is it can set up a hierarchy of who's more trans or not, or who's more of a man or more of a woman. And who that really leaves out in our community, which happens a lot when you're talking about transitioning, especially medically, or if you're talking about passing, is the folks that are not subscribing to the gender binary. Our gender queer folks, our gender nonconforming folks, folks that don't necessarily want to take hormones or have surgery, or maybe they want to do a little bit or to a certain degree. And I'd love to talk to you just about how you kind of, you and I both know folks that it's like, we either use third pronouns or doesn't matter which pronoun, or I'm not going to go through surgery. And so I want to know from your perspective, like how you think, or if you've talked to folks about how they kind of relate to that concept of passing when, according to the cis community, they may never, quote unquote, pass or be read as what they truly want to be read as. It's usually male or female, not somewhere in between or anything else. I'd love to hear your prospect on that.
So we know that passing is a real thing that people experience, right? That there's this not just idea, but this moment or moments where people either pass where they're at or they don't pass. And I'm using little air quotes, but you can't really see them because we're online. Part of me, when I was thinking about this today, I was trying to write down kind of what makes up this idea of passing. When you drill down, when you think about it, like what creates this idea that there can be people who pass. And I think that part of that is the idea of a binary gender system, right, that there are people who are men and there are people who are women and there's no one else. And I think the other thing that goes along with that is that there are lots of articles and things written about this, these kind of like idealized standards of beauty or attractiveness, right, that in order to be attractive, if you're a man, you have to look like this. If you're a woman, you have to look like this. And I think those two things come together to create to create the idea of passing, right, that you have, in order to exist as everybody else exists, you have to fall within the normal range of these two things. And so I think that it makes it incredibly difficult for our friends, our family, who don't necessarily identify with being a man or with being a woman, or if they do, they fall more along the feminine or the masculine spectrum than others who identify as that same gender. It's frustrating. I was talking to my colleague Day a little bit before this, and they were talking about that tension between trying to be who you are and feel good about who you are and being safe and not necessarily falling into either gender. I mean, it's a difficult, or to any gender at all, it's a difficult thing to do, and it's a difficult space to live in. In some ways, I feel really privileged and fortunate that the way that I feel most comfortable is just as like a regular Joe. You know, I wear funny socks. I wear socks with polka dots and stripes, and, you know, I think I have some with dinosaurs on them. And, you know, I have one piercing, but other than that, I'm like a generic-looking dude, and that's how I feel comfortable. And
right.
There shouldn't the idea that somehow because I look like a generic guy that I am somehow seen as more acceptable or I'm made more welcome, and that I'm literally more safe is really, it's a frustrating, I don't have a better word for it right now. It's something that is incredibly frustrating to think that just because of these random things that I'm safer than someone else that I care about. So I don't know if that actually answers the question that you asked, but there we go.
I think it absolutely does, and I think that you basically touched on something that I wholeheartedly agree with, and that's that very often when you start to tease apart the ends of what, and it's not necessarily what I mean when I say this is not necessarily that if you say I want to pass that you're meaning this, but oftentimes when the cisgender community or non-trans folks read someone as one or the other, what they're really picking up on is social cues that they have been taught that are, this is what a man looks like and this is what a woman looks like, right? And it reinforces those gender stereotypes. And quite honestly, not only can it negatively impact our gender nonconforming friends that don't identify as either male or female, it can negatively affect the ones that do identify as male or female. You know, I have several friends that whether they be cis or trans, gay or straight or bisexual or intersex, that they identify as male or female, but they don't necessarily look like what society says is a proper or correct or acceptable male or female. Like you were talking about, you feel most comfortable as an everyday Joe. I know a guy that likes to run around in pink tutus, and he identifies as male, wholeheartedly, male pronouns, he, him, his, not, you know, he does not consider himself genderqueer. He is a man that loves to run around in skirts and pink tutus and makeup occasionally and sometimes jeans and boots, and that should be okay. But what is it that constitutes what's appropriate for male versus female, right? And so I think that can kind of reinforce those gender stereotypes. I have to agree with you that I also have that privilege that I feel most comfortable with. You know, my facial hair is something that my wife doesn't necessarily always like, but she advocates for me to keep it because when I shave it off, people wonder if she's my mother. You know, that's happened before. And I'm okay with looking like I was identified as male at birth and being more masculine than feminine. That's the way I'm most comfortable. So I agree. I share that privilege with you that I feel that way. But, you know, I have some mannerisms that being raised by a lot of Italian women, I talk a lot with my hands and I do things like that. And I've had people tell me, you know, I know that you've said something about being read. You know, you get read as a man like you want, but you're read as a gay man, which you said you don't have a problem with. But let me tell you, a lot of times it's because you talk with your hands. And I'm like, and I literally used my hands and told that person, well, that's not going to change, right? Like I'm not going to draw a line between who I am and say this part of me is okay and this part of me I have to put away. Now, do I recognize those things when I don't feel safe? Absolutely. But that's when survival kicks in and not, it's not right for me to be this person, right? So, you know, so yeah, absolutely, I agree with you. And yes, it did kind of, you know, it's not necessarily did this answer the question? No, yeah, it's just I believe that's a big part of the discussion, and it's something that I don't think that a lot of people realize. You know, I think that a lot of people just take these weird cues that tell them that's not right or that's not what I expected, and they slap a label on it. I'm about to show my age either positive or negatively, but I was surfing through Facebook, I think it was today or yesterday, and I saw an article or a blog post written by someone who's on this season's episode of, Real World, which I got to be honest, I didn't even know that show still existed. So that's what I mean by I'm about to show my age. I haven't seen that show in God knows how long, decades, right? That was a mid-'90s show for me, right, on MTV. And apparently this is someone who identifies as a lesbian of color, and because she's tall and has an athletic build and is thin in certain places where most women of color are not, people there's all these internet rumors swirling around saying that she's got to be trans. And at first, when she heard that, it really bothered her. But it wasn't because she was like, ew, trans people. It's like, no, I'm me. Please don't put a label on me that doesn't belong there. And what I loved about the blog post was that she basically said that, I am not trans. And having just been mislabeled this one time, that was frustrating for me because people didn't see me as I am and as I felt I was. I can't imagine what it must be like to constantly be misgendered and mislabeled the way that my trans brothers and sisters are. And this was something that her friends kind of talked her through and she was just like, there was this realization for her in that, she didn't like being labeled something that she wasn't, but she said that it was a learning experience for her and a chance for her to learn more about another group of the LGBTQ community. And I'm not sure if you had heard about that, but I was just, it was really great and heartening to see something written by a cisgender person that said all the things that most trans people are saying in blogs all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. And your question earlier about the hierarchy made me think about Laverne Cox. Laverne Cox is this incredible trans woman. She's a black trans woman. She's an actress. She's on Orange is the New Black, and she actually just did the keynote at the Task Force's Creating Change conference. The whole thing is up on YouTube if folks want to search for it. But one of the things that she kept saying over and over is that loving trans women, and she said this in a couple different ways, but loving trans women of color is a revolutionary act. And there's this idea, the trying to sort us by saying, who passes more or who's had this surgery or who takes hormones, and that makes them a real trans person. First of all of our experiences are different. What we need, what we want, those are all different. But I sometimes get frustrated when people say we should just love everyone and that will solve all the problems in the world. But I think Laverne has it right. The act of loving and supporting and investing in trans women and investing in trans men and investing in trans people of color, that is revolutionary because that's not something that society does, right?
That's right.
If we do that, that is revolutionary. That is something that makes a difference. That's something that supports someone and helps them move forward, whether or not they fit into society's definition of what passing is or what respectable is or what everybody else thinks they should be doing. Loving and supporting each other in a real substantive way makes a difference.
Yeah. No, I absolutely agree. And I also absolutely agree in your characterization of Laverne Cox. I was privileged enough to meet her when she came into town, and she's just a remarkable human being. And between her and Carmen Carrera and Janet Mock, I am loving the fact that right now the people in the media, the trans people in the media that are getting the most coverage in the last several weeks have been trans women of color. And the reason I absolutely that's so heartening to me is that is the portion of our community that is murdered the most and that is subject to the most physical discrimination and things like that. And so I wholeheartedly agree that it is such a revolutionary act because, like you said, not only is it not something that society does, but when you make a step or you make a choice or it just is in you to love and support not only trans people but especially trans people of color, that is what flies in the face of the statistics that are saying that so many people are committing suicide and being murdered, and most of them are trans women of color, right? And so it is a revolutionary act, like she says, because it can, an act of love, and I don't just mean a